Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Black with No Chaser TV. I'm TK, and joining me today is a very special group of people. Um, as you know, we talked about on our page a little while back about the Black Mamas bailout that took place on Mother's Day. Well, joining me now are some very influential people who have played a lot in helping these women to get released from jail. So we all know how important it is for representation, how important it is for family, and like I said, these people played a very important role in reuniting mothers with their families on a special day like Mother's Day. So, without further ado, I want you all to welcome Thomas Bellender, Cirillo Monego, Jess James, and of course DJ Lawrence, the creator and founder of Black with No Chaser, to the show. How y'all doing?
Bless,
Doing
thank you for
good,
having
man.
Good to be here.
So, what I wanted to do before we just get into the conversation is just go around the table, if you will, and just let each and every one of you introduce yourselves and tell your credentials and how you were a part of all of this. So, I'll start with you, Jess, if you would just let us know about yourself.
Yeah. Again, hey everybody, thank you. My name is Jess James, and I'm a program coordinator at People's Advocacy Institute, um, where I was instrumental in like helping participate in the Black Mamas bailout that were actually happening all over the U.S. As part of the national bailout that happens and has been happening for the last 3 or 4 years um, in efforts to end money bail by bailing out Black mothers who've been incarcerated in county jails. Um, yeah, that's a little context behind what the Black Mamas bailout is.
Indeed, indeed, and I thank you for the work that you've done. Um, how about you, Thomas? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank y'all again for doing this. My name is Thomas Bellender. I am an attorney licensed in Mississippi, Florida, Texas, Kansas, and Washington, D.C. My office is located in Jackson. I do a lot of work with the People's Advocacy Institute. Rukia Lumumba and Chokwe Lumumba are close friends and essentially business partners of mine. And so when the time came for this program and this effort came about, I just sort of volunteered myself to help and was able to secure, for one of the two mamas that we bailed out, I was able to secure one of the actual bond orders because she had just been arrested the day prior. And so it's a tremendous need in the community for it. And just the way that it came about and all of the different moving parts really was inspirational, even on an attorney's level who we come in contact with these things all the time. And it's just a matter of the way this came about was really special.
Yeah, indeed. And again, to you as well, I really appreciate the work that you put into this. I'll go to you, Cirillo. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, sir. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, from New Orleans, Louisiana, based here in DC. I actually know a lot of you folks are folks in Jackson right now, like the Lamumbas, stuff like that. In my time, I was in law school in Jackson, Mississippi College. Now I do issue advocacy and a lot of policy work, government relations work out here in DC on a host of issues. One of those things that have always been very near and dear to me, and I don't even make any money off of, to be honest, has always been criminal justice reform. I think it's a very familiar narrative, especially growing up in Black communities and kind of like understanding what that means and why it's so important to keep parents and caregivers and people that are leaders in the community, right, and not being locked up for like frivolous charges. To be honest, one of the things that got me into this work was issued with the Mississippi Department of Corrections. And being in a public defender's office while I was in law school and doing community engagement work and activism work while in Jackson. And that really exposed me to a lot of the social injustices that's happening not just only in Mississippi, but also around the country. And so I bring to the table here not only my personal feelings, but also my professional feelings about why this social impact and social justice work is so important. And I'm honored and privileged to be on the phone call and town hall with you guys today.
Oh yeah, and I appreciate you too, Cirillo. I mean, you're a member of Black with No Chaser. We've done, other work together, and it's always a pleasure, talking to you, picking your brain, and working together to help our people. How about you, CJ? Tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
What's going on, everybody? CJ Lawrence, CEO of Black with No Chaser, and obviously been involved in the practice of law for the last, I'm losing count, 12 years since 2007. And, it's always been something as far as civil rights advocacy, something that I've been involved with directly in criminal justice reform. In my law practice, but the one of the main purposes in creating Black with No Chaser was to be directly involved in social advocacy and reform on literally on this level from the ground up, from the bottom up. And so the Black Mamas Bailout reform is something that I thought was essential and I thought was important and critical. And so it was a no-brainer for us to get involved with it on this level from my end. Excuse me, man. That's my 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 phone ringing in the background. But it's an opportunity that I thought we couldn't miss to help people who are the most marginalized people, certainly in the country and likely in the world. In Black women, Black mamas, and I thought that we had to jump on the opportunity to help national bailout with our platform because we have the opportunity to reach out and disseminate this message to so many. I don't think people really understand the magnitude fully of or the impact of cash money bail and how it directly is predatory when it comes to the impoverished, particularly. And so, I think what excited me most about this was creating a platform that amplified the voices of this particular movement to speak directly for marginalized people, poor black people, poor black women, and femmes that were suffering as a result of a policy like cash money bail.
Oh yeah, indeed, man. You said some things, and it made me think about a few things. I'm gonna just give a overview to the people watching. The numbers that I came across was circa, I believe, 2017, but there were 23 million people incarcerated in the United States. Of that 23 million, 67% of those were Black people. And a growing majority of those were Black women. I did a podcast a little while back talking about the Black Mamas Bailout, and I pointed out that the incarceration rate of Black women is 2 to 3 times higher than that of their white counterparts. And it also reached down to the juvenile level because teens, Black female teens, were 4 to 5 times as likely to be arrested or incarcerated as their white counterparts at the same age. So with all that being said, what you guys are doing is very important because we all know that the odds are stacked against us, period. And it's just unfair in the way that the justice system is working. So, I don't want to just keep harping on it, so I'll just move on. You were talking about the cash bail system, and it has come to my attention that a lot of people aren't fully aware of what bail is, what bond is, and things of that nature. So I feel in order for them to fully understand this conversation, they should be fully aware of, the moving parts of it all. So I'll start with you, Thomas. You are a defense attorney as well as you, CJ. Both of y'all can chime in on this. But can you just give the people a history of what bail is, what bond is, and how the whole system works?
Sure. So bail, the term bail is essentially used to describe an amount of money that a court sets for pretrial release of an individual. In other words, depending on the charge and depending on the court, and some have a certain scale that they go by. Typically what happens when someone is arrested, they are then brought for an arraignment, and at that arraignment, generally they are given a bail amount, and that amount ranges from from zero, essentially, if they wanted to just release them on their own reconnaissance, or in other words, just released without the posting of any sort of bail, on the promise that they'll return to court, up to several $1 million if that's what the court deems necessary. So bail is the term used to describe the amount of money that the court requires for that. A bond is the instrument that is sometimes used to secure someone's bail. So a bond is typically posted by a bondsman or a bondswoman who is licensed by the state to do so. And then that bond might be a combination of things. Sometimes the most common bond is a bondsman will say, okay, if you're a local person to this area where you were arrested, we will post your bond if you can come up with 10% of the amount of your bond or the amount of the bail that's set, plus a fee to the bondsman. So if you say, for example, someone's set on a $10,000 bail, the bondsman will quote $1,000 plus, $50 or $100 fee that's paid to them, and then they will post the bond to the clerk's office, and then that secures the release once the paperwork's done. Bonds can be posted also by way of, or secured, I should say, by way of real property. Sometimes people are forced to leverage their homes or other type property in order to secure the amount. And so some of the dynamic there, some of the, what really will push, or where the push for reform comes from, is bond and bail system is not in this country meant to be set to punish someone. The criminal justice system has other ways to punish individuals who are guilty of crimes. That comes by way of their sentence. What we're talking about is the process by which people's appearance at court is secured in between when they are initially arrested and when their court date may be. That process can take months or longer, particularly depending upon whether someone is initially arrested for a misdemeanor or a felony. Depending upon the jurisdiction, there may be a process by which an indictment has to be, not necessarily has to be, but would be secured from a grand jury. And so in the meantime, if someone, and again, at this point in the process, someone has only been accused of the crime. They have not yet been, we're not talking about restitution payments after a conviction or a fine or a fee that comes after someone is found guilty. We're talking about simply an amount of money that the court is saying, look, pay this money so that way we believe that you'll come back to court. The bondsman industry essentially becomes like bounty hunters in a sense that if the person does not show up, then the bondsman's bond is held accountable for the $10,000 or what have you that was the original bail amount. And so that bondsman then becomes an arm of the court to go find the individual and bring them back to court. So, as I'm sure, it should be obvious at this point, but in 2019 America, you can't assume people just understand one thing or the other. But this system indiscriminately, I should say, it affects people, particularly people of low income, far greater than it does people with means. In other words, for somebody who gets arrested for a charge and comes from a high class community and a six-figure income, posting $1,000 is no big deal. They just do it and move on. Whereas lower income people, particularly those in some of our larger cities, and this is disproportionately minority communities in America, it affects them in a way that it does not affect other folks. And so the other folks can't really understand that and choose not to a lot of times because they can't relate to what it means to not know where your next meal's coming from. People who come from wealth or come from a lot of assets can't even really understand what it means to struggle, what it means I got to choose between keeping my lights on or putting food on my table, and particularly where someone gets arrested. And now we're talking about accusations. So we haven't even got to the process of determining whether someone's actually guilty or whether it was probable cause or not. Once the arrest is done, then at that point, people in this country are just forced to come up with the money to just get them out, so that way they can go and figure out what the next steps are. And so there's certainly some reforms that can and should be made to the system, so that way this is not used as a sword or as some sort of punishment to people before they've been convicted of a thing. It needs to solely be for the purpose of securing someone's attendance at a trial. And I think if we really did a statistical analysis of that, I don't think a higher bond versus a lower bond versus no bond, I am already suspicious that the amount of the bond would not equate to whether someone's going to show back up or not. In other words, if someone can get out on a bond and has the intention to flee, I don't think if you gave them $1,000 bond, a $10,000 bond, or a $100,000 bond, you're solely sort of making it more difficult. But if someone can come up with, a little bit of money to the bondsman and their intention is to flee, I think they're going to do so. And so some of those are the complexities that the system faces, and we should all be striving to improve that system every single day.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just going to follow up. I know that was something that you and I appreciate Thomas's assessment of bail and of bond, and I think it was spot on with regard to how they're defined as well as their impact. One of the things that I'll talk about is the constitutionality of how bonds are set in the first place. Essentially, there's a 2-point test that should be assessed when applying or determining how a person's bond, determining whether or not a person warrants a bond or not. Not even the amount, but two of the things that a judge is particularly looking at is, one, whether a person is a flight risk, and two, whether that person is a danger to the community. Now, if they don't meet both, if they essentially are not a flight risk and they are not a danger to the community, what that means is that a bond is warranted. If they don't satisfy those two prongs, then what the judge should assess is that there should be no bond. If someone is either a flight risk or either a danger to the community, it shouldn't be a determination of how much I'm going to set your bond at, but whether or not I should or should not give you one in the first place. So the issue that we are seeing many times is that, dependent on the crime being alleged, and we have to understand that the presumption of innocence is always with the defendant prior to trial and at trial, right? Until a person is being proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, the presumption of innocence remains with them the entire time. Bond and bail is something that is occurring during the pretrial phase. That means we haven't even gotten to the point of filing motions or anything of that nature. In a lot of cases, people have not even been indicted. This hasn't been submitted to the grand jury for them to determine whether probable cause exists with which to charge these people with the crime. So at this point, You have people who are literally just accused of something, who are being held and held for long periods of time, for months and even years at a time, on things simply because they have had bonds or bail set at an amount that they literally could not afford, and that the judge knew they could not afford at the time they said it. Some of the examples I would use would be, uh, for instance, if you have a 16-year-old person who's accused of uh, auto burglary, or of or even, something more than auto burglary, and the judge decides, well, I'm going to set your bond at $50,000. Well, the reality is that, uh, based on, if you use a bail bondsman, you would need to come up with $5,000, or with collateral in the form of an asset worth $50,000. Usually people put up their homes, if they have homes, in order to do that, and the money has to match. Basically, you have to have an asset that's worth it to the bondsman to take the risk, because essentially what a bondsman is doing is they are a bonded insurer, essentially, or they're backed by an insurance company, and they are saying that I will assure that this person will show up for court, and if they don't show up for court, I'm going to go out and get this person. Well, a 16-year-old usually is not going to have $5,000, and a lot of times, if you are if you're a poor family, I don't think most families in the United States of America right now can come up with $5,000 that easily, uh, simply for the accused crime. And then you got to go potentially and pay a lawyer as well, uh, to represent the 16-year-old who's been accused and charged as an adult. So I have a particular case, um, where a young man was charged with a crime in Hinds County, uh, where I literally was fighting for a bond reduction for this young man, uh, first time offender, for almost 2 years, just to get it into court, to argue it, to have it reduced from a $500,000 bond to, I was able to get it down to $50,000, and that was considered a win. But that still meant that he had to come up with $5,000 in order to be able to do it. Uh, and the problem with that is essentially, um, it directly impacts, as Thomas said, poor people more than it impacts anyone else. To a rich man, or a rich woman, uh, you can set the bond at $1 million, and they'll come up with $100,000 like it isn't anything. But you can set up, for a poor person, you can set a bond at $1,000, and if they don't have access to those funds, then they could sit in jail for however long the process takes. And if the cases are backlogged in a court, then they literally can be sitting. Um, I had one person who awaited a murder trial for 4 years in Hinds County, and was eventually found not guilty when we tried the case. Um, but we had to get to the case in order to try it. Uh, and there are other people who are charged with lesser crimes, lesser offenses, who are being housed and held, uh, essentially at the mercy of the court and the judgment, based not on constitutionally what the court should have assessed, whether a bond is worthy or whether it is not, but because the court decided that because of what you're accused of, I'm going to set you a bond at a level that I don't think you can make, so that it ensures that you stay in here, because ultimately what I want is for you to stay in here. So it's essentially a workaround. Uh, what a judge should always assess in these instances is, if I have determined whether this person warrants a bond, then I've already determined that I need to set a bond that they can actually afford. If I'm going to set a bond, if I don't believe that they deserve a bond based on either they are flight risk, or I believe they are a danger due to the heinousness of the crime of which they're accused, or the vicinity to which they would be to the alleged victim, or a number of other things that they could assess, then they can say, well, I'm not going to set a bond, because based on what I've considered, when looking at all the factors, I don't believe that a bond is warranted. But if I am going to set a bond, then I need to set a bond that you can afford if it's going to be a cash bond, uh, to ensure to use it as collateral. And the other thing that I would say is a lot of times with a bail bondsman, that money is not refundable. So if you pay a bail bondsman, uh, if you owe if you have $100,000 bond and you pay a bail bondsman $10,000, then that's $10,000 you won't ever see again, because that's now that bail bondsman's uh, or woman's money. And you know, again, that's a substantial amount to pay just for your freedom, just for the opportunity to have a say in the conversation. But that's what we're seeing happening around the country, and that has been happening for years uh,
So,
to poor people.
So let's
CJ, I have a quick question. I just want to ask. So, when someone is um, in jail in their pre-trial stage, and they have not paid their bond and they're still in there waiting. And I know in Hinds County we have a workhouse, and I know that maybe in other places as well too. Are those people in jail working at any point in time to pay off their bail, or are they working to make a profit for possibly the jail or any other ways? It's just kind of like in the like it is in a prison system, or are they just sitting there in like a holding cell?
Okay, thank you for that question, Tyson. And I'm going to answer part of that, and I'll let Thomas answer some too of that question, uh, because I think that's a question that both of us can address some. But that's a great question, Tyson. And yes, there's a penal farm on which here in Hinds County where you work on a farm. They literally put you in overalls or coveralls, and they send you to a farm to work. If you are familiar with the film Life, then it's not very dissimilar from the farm that Ray and Claude worked on in Life, or are very dissimilar from even the fields, the cotton fields of Parchment, where uh, where men in the MDOC, the Mississippi Department of Corrections system, are sent to work as well. Uh, and there's just been a report out about the conditions of Parchment, which maybe we'll get to later. But I'm getting a little off track. Yes, there are people that they literally put on farms here in Mississippi if they are not if they do not, and it's farms for profit. The county makes money off of it, and so there's an incentive to them to keep people housed, excuse me, in that farming process. And so, yeah, that's a good question, and there are systems like that throughout the country.
So I
Here
will
in here in
follow up
this,
with that. Follow up with that, and maybe Thomas, you answer as well too. So in the situation where someone is found and not found guilty at all, right? Um, do they get the money that they worked? Do they get that back, or does the county keep that? Or is it because I'm getting that to the point of it seems like, that's enslavement, and you're a slave, you're made to do some work, and you don't get anything back from that just because someone has arrested you, put you under arrest, and put you in jail, and you're not even found guilty yet. Is that the case in that, or how does that work?
Well, that's the way they get around that is that last language in the 13th Amendment, where it says, except as punishment for a crime where you've been duly convicted. And that's
Right,
where
but that's
prison
what I'm
system
saying.
actually makes money
In
off.
the point where they're not convicted, they're not. You can't say that they're in there for a crime if they're just in the pre-trial stage because they haven't been convicted yet. But they're in kind of a holding purgatory until there is a trial and they're forced to do work. Where does that, what did they get that money, or does that just lost and they just did some work for nothing?
My understanding, I've never known someone to get any sort of money that they would have earned while working through county jail system or anything like that if and when they were to be released, either pre-trial or at a trial. And they also don't apply any sort of money or credit towards the bond. I have known that essentially the longer someone sits on pretrial at a current bond, if they're in there 3 or 4 months, the judges and some of even the public defenders will do a sweep through the jail of the files of people who've just been in there a while, and they'll try to see about either a combination of either reducing their bond or pressing for a guilty plea on what we call an information, which is essentially not an indictment, but it's a formal way to circumvent the indictment process, to just say, you plead guilty to this information that we've provided to you, and then you get time served, and they just release you. But other than that, no, I'm not aware of any credit or money that's returned to anyone, even if they do take you from pretrial holding to do some sort of work.
I'm not either. So
listen,
I'm gonna let Tyrus go ahead.
CJ and Thomas, y'all just gave us some really impactful information about the system and cash bail and things of that nature. I kind of want to use that to kind of circle back to the original topic of while we're here talking about the Black Mama's bailout. And I'm gonna direct this to you, Jess, being that you are part of the People's Advocacy Institute, and Thomas and Tyson as well. What was there a specific situation or case that y'all came across that spawned y'all to do the work that you did, or was it just y'all just saw so much and just finally had enough to where you realize that how unfair and unjust the cash bail system is and the role that it's playing in the poor communities, that y'all said, look, we got to do something about it? What was that springboard to move y'all forward?
Yeah. So People's Advocacy Institute, first of all, is a nonprofit that specifically and mainly works in the work of fighting against those systems and circumstances that continuously and create like decriminalizing or situations for minorities, mostly and mainly Black folks, because we are in Jackson, Mississippi, and other marginalized folks, right? So poor people as well. So that's what we deal with. We deal with working on what it looks like in the world to not be criminalized for being poor. What it looks like in the world to not be criminalized for having poor education, or simply not being educated on things to know how to not or be in situations like this, or how to get yourself out of situations when we know there's really nothing that we can do about it. We have a lot of comrades, some Southerners on new ground, who actually started doing this work 3 or 4 years ago. And we all know that like money is one main reason and one way that Black folks and other marginalized people are criminalized, right? If you don't have enough money to do this, then you go to jail. If you don't have enough money to do this, then you starve. Or you don't have enough money to do this, then you lead to doing getting your money the way you know how to get your money, and that might not be the legal way. And so we were moved by this work and the impact of like the goal to end money bail. And that's how we got involved in this work. That's how we started doing it. And this work also, it not only like when somebody is in jail and they have to pay amount of money to get out to prove their innocence, first of all, to prove their innocence, it not only impacts that person, it impacts the people who are giving them support while they're in jail or while they're trying to get out of jail, their families, right? and whoever else they call. And another part of our work at PAI, or People's Advocacy Institute, is helping families yeah, not become like a part of a struggling system that they can't live and thrive in.
Agreed. Now, CJ and Thomas, y'all both brought up some points about, the length of time that people remain in jail waiting for a speedy trial. And I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the Sixth Amendment, that talks about, having a speedy trial and whatnot. Um, is the cash bail system a direct reflection on people not having a speedy trial, or is it a symptom of people not having a speedy trial? Like, what um what causes what? I guess what I'm trying to ask.
I would more so compartmentalize the two things. Um, it may have some impact there. I think some of the reasons, because you certainly are entitled to a speedy trial per the Constitution, but some of the reality of just the system itself, the number of people who are charged with a crime at any one given time, the resources of the jurisdiction, courthouses and judges, and there's only so many judges, so many lawyers for any one set of folks. In Hinds County, which I believe is the most populous county in the state of Mississippi, there's still only 4 circuit judges. The district, and we all come back to money. I mean, there's only so much resource to go around, and so I think those issues have more so to do with the time frame for people getting the trial as anything else does. I think where the issues overlap is if you're a person who has means, certainly the means to hire an attorney and the means to potentially bond yourself out or bail yourself out altogether, determines whether or not the length of time that it takes to get you to trial, whether you're at the house or you're sitting in somebody's county jail cell. And so, you can implement that towards, whether or not, someone's guilty or innocent of a crime. But that's, like I said, that this is the pretrial process. So at the end of the day, the difference is if you've got finances and resources to get yourself out, then you'll spend that pretrial time, waiting at home with your family, providing for your kids, versus someone who doesn't have those same resources. And so the Bailout Collective has sought to, and it's some programs that Rukia and certainly she's not on the call today, but she had a flight that got delayed, and she would have given us some great background as to sort of how the funding came about and sort of the different organizations that are also a part of that have all kind of come together for this Bailout Collective idea. That posted the cash bonds for the cash bail for these two young ladies the other week. But again, it's just a tremendous disservice in a lot of situations where the only reason that someone is being held pre-trial in a jail cell is a financial decision, and not, as CJ mentioned, an issue of, are you a risk to the community? Or do you pose some sort of harm, or the foreseeable likelihood of harm, or a flight risk, meaning that in all likelihood you won't show back up? It's more so just an issue of, do you have the money to keep greasing the wheels of the system? And then if you do, they'll just allow you to go on out.
I think that thank you, Thomas, for that. I think that there are definitely some issues with regard to both procedural due process and substantive due process when it comes to how bail is applied. Tyrus, I would agree with Thomas that it's literally a game of whether or not it's a pay to play game. And what you find is that throughout the process of the system, it is literally a pay to play. Uh, from the time you either hire a private counsel to the time that you are able to well, let's start with bond. If you are able to bond out and then hire private counsel, or hire private counsel to get you a bond reduction to then bond out, uh, or if you have to say I can't afford that bond and I'm an indigent person, and so I'm going to have to go through the public defender's office. There's some incredible people who fight for the public defender's office, and I believe Cirillo could probably speak even more to that, having had experience working in that capacity. But they are backlogged, just as the county itself is backlogged with cases. And so is that uh, rather than having an expeditious process in place to move along small cases like non-violent weed cases and things like that, or even cases like Sandra Bland's case out in Texas, or Khalif Browder's case where he was alleged to have stolen a backpack in New York, where he sat on Rikers Island for almost 2 or 3 years in jail on a bond that was $900. It was a $900 bond, and his family could not afford to pay. And what that says is that this is essentially a war and a condition on poor people that deprives them of due process. When it comes to the pretrial, even pretrial diversion programs are programs that you have to afford to be able to be in many counties. Because if you can't make the payments to remain on the pretrial diversion program, guess what happens? You get took off there. The non-adjudication program is a program where you still are going to have to pay on probation. So there's a cost at every phase. There are court fees and costs in the process. So it is it is about procedural due process and about Sixth Amendment rights from the standpoint that issues come into play with speedy trials, particularly when you know that someone has been accused of marijuana possession of over 30 grams, or between 30 and 100 grams, or whatever the amount may be. That is a felony amount, but now this person is has a bond. I had one case where the the kid had already made bond, uh, and the prosecutor, it was a simple possession of marijuana case. The prosecutor was pushing for an increase in the bond to 25,000, and one of the judges, who was a judge at the time, who was considered a harsh judge, uh, many standards, as how they ruled on things. Even the judge said, "I'm not going to do that with this amount, this little amount uh, of a weed." And when you think about there are prosecutors that are attempting. You have officers who have a say in how much the bond should be set at. I think that might be a constitutional issue and a question of the unauthorized practice of law. Them having a say in whether or not a person's bond should be set at a certain amount or not. And you have the the judges assessing it, and you have the district attorney's office saying sometimes, "Oh, I think this person's bond should be increased." Well, if we look at the median income in Hinds County, uh, we know that people are making, a lot more than $35,000-$40,000 a year as a household. And if that's what the entire household is bringing in, then we certainly know that we set a bond at $50,000, we're asking for 1/8 of the entirety of their household income for the year, in order for somebody to be released uh, from bondage, because essentially that's what it is. Uh, and so I do think, you know, uh, there's a lot of constitutionality questions that come into play uh, when it comes to it. I think that's why it's so critical to highlight the issues with cash money bill. The This is how problematic cash money bill is, and Thomas and Jess can probably speak to this more, having worked directly with the bailout. It's so problematic that they don't even expect you to be able to do it. They came up there with $10,000, and the clerk's office didn't know what the hell to do
Yeah. Yeah, we
because of
had
it.
an
I'll let
issue
them
with
speak
it.
to it.
But no, we had it when we brought the first one was $5,000, and we brought that to the clerk. They had they weren't exactly sure if they were even allowed to take it because it's just so unusual that someone actually has the full amount of their bail. The vast majority of people use the bond system, and so even the bondsman, it's an industry that's fighting against what it is we want to accomplish because they're making money from this process, from requiring people to do this. And so as we go and try to deal with the clerk's office, they had a standard form that they wanted signed, and it just had nothing to do with the conditions of the release that we were acquiring, because it wasn't a situation where somebody was posting a partial bond. This was someone who was posting full cash bail, and they just really didn't know what to do with it. And eventually, we got the lady, corresponded out, but that's just another symptom of the system to where, okay, the judge says you need $5,000 to get out of here. You literally bring $5,000 to the courthouse, and they're still looking at you like, well, what do I do with this? Well, I'm not sure what. And so there's a lot of work to be done.
And I think what that says is they set bonds that they don't expect you to be able to pay, because when you are able to pay it, they don't even know how to receive it. And what that lets you know is that there is a systemic issue at play, because there is not even a system in play to receive the funds, because they know who they're giving these bonds to. They know you can't afford it, and they expect that you're either going to have to go through the process of dealing with a bail bondsman to post you a bond, or are you going to sit in jail until it's your time? And they expect for that to be the case with most people. And when and that money also that they brought up there is refundable money. You're supposed to get that money back at the end of your trial if there's no court fees or anything. I'm gonna let Jess and Cirillo speak as well.
Well, before we go to them, because what I have to ask actually really they can dive into. But CJ, you brought up a name earlier that was on my mind the whole time we had been talking, which was Khalif Browder. And his case in history is well documented about his mental state and what the system had did to him mentally. And it made me think about, and I'm gonna go to you, Jess, about this, because you work so closely with these women that y'all help get released. What was some of the things you found out from talking to them, like some of the mental anguish that they went through, whether it was through the injustices that they faced in the system, or the things they dealt with once they were charged, once they were jailed, and once they were released?
Yeah, so I think this mental anguish speaks exactly, segueing off of what Thomas and CJ was just talking about how the system of money bail and paying a bail anyways is just so flawed and messed up in the first place, is that you don't expect this person to bond out of your system. And then when they do, you make it very difficult, you as in the system or whoever, yeah, make it so difficult to even not understand how this person even got the money that they needed to get what they needed done. So then you create another problem which makes this person feels like they're never getting out. So speaking specifically to that $10,000 that we paid, so this woman will be free of even paying the court after, right, for this bond, because we paid it in full. It's very demoralizing, for one thing, I would say, meaning that that person humanity, like, what is even my existence if you said that I should do a thing, and when I do, you make it difficult and hard. So that $10,000 was for a woman who we were bailing out, who was brought in on some charges that happened years ago. Um, some charges that happened years ago came to her home where she lived with her children and was getting ready to start a new job and a new life, and also was in the midst of being in school, right, to make a better life and earn more money. Um, and that happened. So wanting to be hit by our justice or injustice system, um, with apprehending some crime that's probably not, that's not even that felonious or that much of a crime in the first place. To say that you did something a while back and we found it and now we're gonna get you for it, even though it doesn't matter that your life is on track right now or whatever is going on with you, we came to wreck this. It's sort of like what is perceived, right? So one, yeah, I would say is very demoralizing, and this is the impact. Um, this happened at her home, right? Children don't know what's going on when their mother come back. And you can just imagine what that feels like to be ripped from your family, not knowing whether or not they will be back. Or mama, what even happened? You know, why are you in this situation? So there are a lot of like mental anguishes and just working closely with the woman who we were bailing out and her mother. They didn't know what to do. Was very distraught. At some point, we had to hold our processes of getting information to do what we needed to do for them to process exactly the feelings that they were going through, or to prepare for what feelings they may have to endure after this, right? And so she's bailed out, but it's not over with, right? Because there's still court dates to come up, and being very sensitive about this woman's situation because she is fighting for a better life where she doesn't have to do things that put her in the eye of being a criminal to make money. Um, so worried about everything that she has worked for to be devastated and crumbled because of this arrest. That probably should have happened 5 or 4 years ago when whatever happened. Um, so yeah, you can just imagine not knowing what to do, not knowing what your future looks like, and also coming this far to have it be brought back down by a system that says that you you need to pay money first of all to prove your innocence, and then when you prove your innocence, you probably got court fees that you need to still pay off because this process did happen, right? Um, you're probably these people are in a state of no rest too as well because it doesn't end after you bond it out.
Now, yeah, one thing that I've noticed in a bunch of different conversations and things I see on television and whatnot is the focus is on the person that the system is doing this to, but a lot of the focus is not directed to the aftermath of the situation as well as others who are affected by this system. You mentioned the lady you guys got out about her kids, and she was going to school and starting a new job, and in a blink of an eye, she lost all of that. And from what I can see, there's no recourse for her. And I'm gonna ask you this, Cirillo. Is there or are you aware of any type of programs or systems in place that could indeed help someone in that situation to get back on their feet?
I think actually I could speak to this because
Okay.
this is
Yeah, Jess,
also.
I say you touch on this. I got a couple of thoughts around like what has been happening and what's still happening right now. And so I'll pause for a second and just allow you to jump back in because I think you have a deeper knowledge about this.
So, but just real quick, I don't. And the people that we're working with the Bailout Collective and Fund in Jackson don't see this as this woman's life being over, or that there is no recourse, because this is what we are doing the bailout work for, to also provide support after, right? And this looks like still raising money to pay for lawyers, retainment fee to go to court with this woman as well, and making sure that we pay all the fines that we can pay while she's in the process of going through court and trial. And also, when we do these things, we also do celebrations to let this woman know that your humanity is not taken. We are fighting for you because you are a human that is worth being fought for. And her, even though her kids were able to see this, they were able to be part of a celebration after she was out. Well, we made banners and things for other mothers that we will be bailing out throughout the rest of this year. So her children were able to see hope as well, and we continue to raise money. So, like I said, that we pay fines while she's actually going through the emotional and all the paperwork that she has to pull up and get ready to, be prepared for her court trial. So it's more than just us raising money to bond somebody out of jail. It goes further than that, and the work goes further into the lives of these people. Like, we don't just have contact. Like, so programs and support groups are formed outside of the initial support that raises the money. So these support groups look like maybe a group of social workers, right? That help assist throughout your life if you need that. Maybe a group of folks who help you find medical needs that you may need to get through this life, like mentally, right? And also just continuously being support in all the ways that you can. Like, this work creates more programs and more support systems outside of that, so that people won't feel like, there is nothing else to do after this but to.
Yeah, just I appreciate all that, and everybody's like weighing in. I think like one thing that we didn't really highlight. I just want to touch on the fact that like when you make somebody require somebody to pay a bail, even if it's $50, I think we're looking at these like tall dollar amounts, and even if it's only 10% of 10,000 is 1,000. So let's say you're trying to get your life back on track. You got to pay for a driver's license. Maybe you gotta pay for a water bill. Maybe it's just food for the week, right? All these things are actually now taken away from these families, from these mothers who have worked tirelessly to get back on their feet, and not get back on their feet from a simple standpoint of the fact that they were like caught up in the criminal justice system. They have prior charges. Some of these women are actually first-time offenders who get into the system and have no understanding about what is really happening to their lives, and literally how they're about to be derailed in a moment's notice by way of being arrested, dragged into court with pre-trial hearings, talk to prosecutors and defense lawyers, whether it be public defender's office. I know a young man when I was in a public defender's office in Hinds County who was arrested 35 times over a course of span of like 5 years. That young man had to be willing into court, lost jobs because of having to follow with court dates. And this is all because of people saying, and this is also goes into the over-criminalization of black communities in America, and they're literally just standing outside in the corner, couches as somebody that's actually a threat to the community. Not to whose community? Well, then that's also up for another discussion, right? Is that we can't even like hang out on the corners and actually do what people do who just want to enjoy life and enjoy a breath of fresh air. And so you have mothers who are locked up. And to me, though, anytime you put somebody under a bail, especially knowing that they're in an impoverished state, that they're economically insecure about what's going on, and that you basically can sign them up for a death sentence. I know a young man back in Mississippi who was actually killed in the prison riots that happened about, I think, like in 2015 or 14, where literally he was waiting trial, could not afford bail, similar to what happened in New York with Bauer and Bauer's case, is that he was killed in the prison riot, and in fact, for a misdemeanor charge, they couldn't get bailed out for. But he's amongst general population with people that are violent offenders and who maybe should to some degree, right, be in a different population than other folk. When you got people waiting trial, like these mothers that Black Mamas Bailout and Bailout National Bailout Initiative are trying to like do, is actually get people away from that, put dollars or keep dollars in their pockets so they can just actually just like live a decent life. Right? We're not talking about go out there and make millions of dollars, which would be amazing. We're talking about people for like activities of daily living, right? Just going out there and having a job, being a productive citizen, taking your kids to and from school, having family time, not being oppressed by a criminal justice system that has no way and no how trying to understand like what these folks are going through on a daily basis and could care, obviously could care less. You're looking at a system right now, back in 2018, I read a report where a country over the entire country, one of the leading lobbying firms that deal with the bail system, like literally raised almost inputted $7 billion into state legislatures to make sure that bail bonding system stays in place. And so just by that sheer number alone, that should tell you that this is not about making sure that we keep people off the streets. We have prosecutors, state prosecutors, district prosecutors, especially in Louisiana under Canizaro's regime, who are literally hired, paying using taxpayers' money to lobby the state legislature while being hired by the state. We have government employees in cahoots with the system to keep folks from being able to get bailed out and deal with their family. I was like, look, I just think that at the end of the day, there's like there's right and there's wrong, and to me, there is no way, shape, form, and fashion that you can couch this and make this right for me. Especially when you are literally wielding mothers into jails and detaining them, and like, look, at the end of the day, black folks when we were born into this world, we're born to trauma. There's enough trauma right now just waking up every day in America and trying to navigate what it means to be black in America, and then you have to wake up one day with your children behind you. You're actually trying to get out to work. You're about to start a new job. You just got everything back on track, and then boom, right? A system that says, you know what? Oh damn, we forgot about you 10 years ago. You owe us some time, sister, brother. And it's like look, it's hard enough out here just living black, and then you gotta live black under the guise that look, one day somebody may pick you up for an offense that was on some petty theft from back in the day. They had some clerical warrant or bench warrant that was out for your arrest, and all of a sudden, a prosecutor who's in cahoots with the criminal justice system to make money off the bail system, who's getting paid and grease their back pockets, and now all of a sudden, that guess what? They come back 10 years later and going, guess what? Now you owe us, right? And they set up these fine systems. Go ahead, CJ.
No, I was just gonna say I'm glad that you said that, but think about that. Like, a lot of times it is something like petty theft. Like, why are we giving people $10,000 bonds or bonds at cash bail at all for shoplifting or for whatever? Why are we picking up people from 4 or 5 years ago for things like that? Why are cases backlogged? You know what I mean? For things like that.
Understanding socioeconomic status around these people, living conditions, and why, from the first place, people feel a need to want to do that in general, right? It's like there's questions, in my opinion, that have yet to be answered by like society as a whole, where at the end of the day, people make choices based upon like their living conditions a lot of times, right? I guarantee you that. Go ahead.
No. What I was gonna say is, so in these instances where you got these black mamas and folk in general, but particularly in this specific instance, black mamas who are being held on cash on bail for whatever the amount may be, you're having instances where these women are, their lights are getting cut off at their apartments. They're losing their apartments or their homes. They're losing their jobs as a result. If you in jail for 2 weeks, you ain't gonna have no job when you come out. You know what I mean? Like, if you go in on the third, if you get locked up on the 30th, you're gonna have an eviction notice by the time you get out on the 14th of the next month. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, because there's no way you can pay that. And if you do bail out, now you can't pay your bill. Now you can't pay your house note or your rent for the month, or you can't keep the water on, or you can't keep the lights on, or whatever it may be. But essentially, it deprives people of both necessities in life, particularly poor people. It targets poor people, but in the instances of these mamas, people who are obviously providing for others in a lot of instances. So it's taking food out of kids' mouths, right? It's taking mamas away from their children. That I had one situation where a mama was locked up. Who was going to take her kids to school? She was the person that sat with them at the bus stop. So when you talk about mental anguish, when you talk about what's being deprived, you're talking about literally the essence of being a mother itself, all the way to being able to keep a roof over you and your family's head, uh, simply because a decision is made, not because you are a danger to the community, not because you are a flight risk at all, but because we want to ensure that you're going to have to pay something to us, if you as an incentive to allow you to be out, because we believe that that's our form of collateral to you. Uh, that's a substantial problem, because essentially what we're saying is, you either go, we're gonna ensure that your condition remains as far as poverty is concerned and as far as struggle is concerned, and you're either gonna be poor and inside this jail and struggle from the inside, or you're gonna have to pay this money that you don't have and struggle from the outside, because now you don't have the means to do things that you would have had to do if you didn't have to pay to get out in the first place.
So listen, let me ask y'all this. I know, kind of back when we first started, I gave numbers about, the number of people that's incarcerated. And I personally think that those numbers are what they are, not because of the amount of crime that's being committed, but because of the changes in the policies that, we have here in America. And my question to you guys is, if you had the chance, what are some of the ways or things that you would implement to reform or even end our cash bail system? I'll start with you, Thomas.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to jump. I got another appointment coming up that I committed to that I'm gonna have to honor. But I just want to thank everybody for doing this and opening this dialogue. And I hope that everybody can hear who can hear our voice, takes this seriously, and actually does implement some things. It's a complicated question as to what we do and where we go from here. Like you mentioned, the legislators who are in control of the laws of each of our states are influenced and continuing to be influenced every single day by individuals and corporations who have tremendous financial resources and who are tied to this system. In other words, it's hard to convince the people in charge that the system needs to be reformed, and there's steps that need to be taken when those same people are having their pockets filled by special interests and lobbyists, and it's a vicious cycle. And so it's difficult to know, even if we can come up with a good plan to say, okay, certain crimes, below a certain level, should have an automatic ROR. We call it ROR, or release on your own reconnaissance. In other words, no bail set. And you balance that with the severity of the crimes, I would think. I mean, because again, the system is here to punish crime, but not necessarily, to punish crime before it's determined that it's happened. And so if you've got somebody, especially somebody local, and even, because with doing work in different states, we see a lot of times where, okay, if I've got a client who's in Texas, but they live in Mississippi, the court in Texas is going to treat them differently solely because they don't live in the same community as where this stuff happened. And so now, simply the process of hiring an attorney, the vast majority of the time, now, of course, you'll have some clients who abscond, but typically when someone hires an attorney, they are saying, look, I'm going to come to trial. I'm not going to pay this lawyer to defend me against this charge and then not show up after having paid this attorney to show up for me. But, I think there are ways and that we as a community have to continue to keep pressure on our elected officials. I know that can be a cliche sometimes, but that's truly the only, if we can say we put together a plan and we have some sort of, a permanent, written bill to say, okay, look, this is what needs to happen. We still have to have a groundswell of support. You got to have people who are calling and pressuring these legislators from the inside, from their own constituency, to say, look, this is a community issue. This is statewide, nationwide, and we need you to vote for this, because they're sitting there thinking, okay, the special interest who's going to give me money, they're going to fund my campaign, they're going to do all this other, is great, but I also have to answer at one point or another to the people who are electing me. And so, there is a delicate balance there. And I think if and when we put together some solid, foundational systemic changes, or at least some proposals that would affect that type change, and we're talking about, different things like, the limitations on what bond can be, because for now, I know Hinds County has just sort of and a lot of counties have just the judge will sit behind the bench with a page or two, printout of, okay, if someone's charged with armed robbery, they get this bond. If they're charged with murder, they get this bond. If they're charged with petty theft, they get this bond. And so you're ultimately in there just fighting against precedent more than anything, because there's no reason to do it one way or the other. It's just, the default that you get a lot of times is, well, this is how we've always done it. And that's ultimately the enemy of any progress, is system or even individuals saying, well, I'm not going to rock the boat because this is just the way it's always been done. And so we see all through history of the problems that creates. And so, but it's still in our political system, in our criminal justice system, of just complacency and people being too afraid to, make a significant change, when that's really what the system requires. Because ultimately, if we're doing what we said we're going to do and protecting people, we don't need to necessarily punish them before they've been convicted of anything. We need to truly allow innocent until proven guilty to mean something, as opposed to just, finding another way to tax somebody, because that's what this is. It becomes a tax on people who are charged with the crime. And we need to continue this dialogue and continue pressuring our legislators and elected officials to make these type changes. And I just thank everybody that's on this call, everybody within each of these organizations, and thank anybody who's actually going to listen to this and sort of digest it and absorb it, that that it means something to you, and that you take it seriously. And so thank you guys again. I do got to run, but thank you guys again for even allowing me to be a part of this.
Hey, thank you, Thomas, for being a part of this, and thank you for putting in the work that you did do. I know you got to run, so again, appreciate it. Thanks for the knowledge that you gave us, and again, thanks for the work that you did put in.
Yes, sir.
Now,
thank
you. I do have one thing I want to touch on before we get out of here, and I'm gonna go to you, Jess. The goal of this call was to educate people on the system, to educate people on Black Mama's Bailout and the things that have been done and the things that need to be done. So with that being said, Jess, can you talk to the people and let them know how they can get involved, how they can help propel this movement forward, and allow it to grow so that it can serve more and more people?
We got to get out here and do the work, period. And that work looks like you questioning your justice systems of what's really going on, what we're actually talking about here. And it looks like, to me, these are I have two simple acts and calls to action to continue to do this work and to make sure that the work we're doing is relevant and heard and felt around our nation. One being, let's start questioning, actually showing up at our city councils, at our whatever processes that are being made to make laws about how your city is governed, right? Let's ask the real questions about what merits arrests being made. And then two, we got to talk about for real what is actually crime and how is crime being imposed on your community, and specifically for me and for my black folks out there, how is crime being looked at and imposed on your community? How do you perceive crime, right? um it's that simple. Question the injustices that are happening around arrest, how people are being arrested and continuously preyed on and being uh by these systems. And then two, a real assessment of what actually is crime and what makes you a criminal. And historically, how has you and your people been looked at as like being criminals? And I'm talking to my black folks when I say that, my people of color folks when I say that. That is because we know that this system harms us the most. And it's as simple as that. And to get involved in this work, national bailout is not a thing that Mississippi is just doing. It's not a thing that Jackson is just doing. It's being done all over the world, and it's been done for like 3 or 4 years by the National Bailout Collective. Those are things you should Google: National Bailout Collective and Black Mamas Bailouts. And there are donations links there for you to donate to bailing out mamas, and how you can get involved and start doing this in your own community with those two axes.
Yeah, right
Indeed,
on.
indeed. I totally agree with that. Um, Cirillo or CJ, either one of you got anything you want to add to this? What Jess just said?
Nah, I think she said it perfectly. Look, we gotta get involved any way possible. A lot of times people think that the only way to get involved is to actually, maybe you don't have time, right? Maybe you don't have time to actually get out in your community. Maybe you don't have the actual dollars on hand to actually donate. A lot of us are actually on social media, right? If you click onto these websites, there are ways where you can share these stories. A lot of times, just by merely sharing a story can ignite and empower someone to kind of do the same. And so, like, what I would charge anyone is that if you can't get involved in those two ways, share digitally and on via social media channels, because that's also an important way. The more we increase that digital footprint, when we actually show people, guess what? This is not just happening, like Jess said, in Mississippi or Jackson, Mississippi, but this is also in DC, right? I work with BYP 100 and folks from that group organization, folks from Dream Defenders and like Baji and all these other Arch City Defenders in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm giving shout outs right now because I know the people that the boots on the ground that's been doing this work, that do it way far better than me probably. And so like at the end of the day, like this is a true collective effort. You got $1, $5, $10. You got a little bit of time to do a post or share anything, whether it be a tweet, whether it be a Facebook repost on Instagram, even sharing with loved ones and community members or folks that are around you can touch. I think that those things we have to be able to do. And so I'll stop there. But at the end of the day, it's all about educating, motivating, agitating, and organizing folks in our communities that we can touch and make that impact as far as we can see it. And so I'll turn it over to CJ if you got any last words. But thank you everybody, and also thank you to the actual the entire National Bailout Collective for doing this work. It's going to be needed not just now, but also in the future. This is not something that's going away. And so keep up the fight and much love.
Hey, look, Jess, Cirillo, y'all really said it, but the thing that I'll say and emphasize again is the purpose here is to educate, motivate, agitate, organize, right? That's how we make our people rise. And if that's what we're essentially and most definitely trying to do, that in this instance, the first thing that if you're listening to this, you can do right now is become more educated around the issue of money bail and why it's a problematic system, particularly for our people, for Black people, who are, obviously arrested and incarcerated at a substantially higher rate than anybody else in this country. Why this is an important conversation. If you are a member of the Black Widow Chaser audience, what you can do to get involved, you can go to nationalbailout.org. That's nationalbailout.org. You can go to the People's Advocacy Institute.com to learn more information about it. You can visit our website, blackwithnochaser.com. You can sign up to be on these emailing lists. You can sign up to literally, you go to blackwithnochasers.com, it's gonna pop up. Hey, we're gonna be emailing out the information. We will provide that information to uh, Black Mama's Bailout as well as to People's Advocacy Institute, so that we can come together and continue around this conversation. As Cirillo said, there's ways to contribute and get involved financially or with your time. Your time is valuable too. Your voice is valuable. Your presence is valuable. Whether that's in person or a willingness to just, with a little small caption, say, hey, this is what's going on in the United States right now. This is what's going on in my state right now. This is what's going on in my city right now around criminal justice reform. And ultimately, what I want is the abolition of cash bail, not just reform around cash bail, but an understanding that this process is a process that particularly targets and is discriminatory against poor people, and particularly poor Black people, since poor Black people are the main people that get swallowed up by this criminal justice system. So when we understand those things and when we challenge those things, then we're moving in the right direction. You're going to learn so much more about this on Black with No Chaser. Y'all can share it. We hope that you share it. We hope that you comment on it. We hope that you tag your friends to it. We hope that you get involved directly with it, because again, Black with No Chaser is not intended to be passive social media. We are active social media. We want to be activated by social media. We want to use it as a launch pad to be able to do the things that we need to do within our communities around the country and around the globe. And so, being involved with things like Black Mama's Bailout and other criminal justice reform initiatives are the types of things that we're going to do to make that happen. And so we're asking you, if you are a part of the Black with No Chaser family and you support the Black with No Chaser family, then this is something that you take up as a cause that matters to you as much as it matters to all of us. Thank y'all so much for chilling with us and listening and tuning in today.
Yeah, basically everything what CJ said. I mean, you guys pretty much covered it all, and there's really nothing that I can add to this conversation. So with that being said, on behalf of Cirillo, on behalf of Jess, on behalf of Thomas, CJ, myself, National Bailout Organization, the People's Advocacy Institute, and Black with No Chaser, we all thank each and every one of you for tuning in. Thank you for your support, for your shares, and hopefully your financial assistance in moving this program that is so needed forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will definitely come back with even more information for you guys.